So we have seen how to give up conditions, right? We have used if block, we have used else, we have used elif, and we have also seen nested conditions, right? So that is one part of control statements where we are based on decisions. Now the next part is, if you see on the screen, we are having some kind of for loop. What is that? And we'll be discussing it everything in a procedure. So you need not worry about it, because we'll be moving our part into repetition control instructions, where you try to repeat it, and basically we have the terminology called as loops. So basically in Python we'll be using only two types of loops, which is for and while. We also have some kind of else suit. We'll be discussing that later. But they basically, with the help of for and while, we can do so many things. Because let me make it simple. If you know the end of a sequence, that's what we have given here. A for loop is used for iterating over a sequence. What is a sequence over there? That can be a string, that can be a list, that can be a tuple, that can be a dictionary, right? We have list, tuple, set, dictionary and strings, right? So if you know the end of that sequence, we can directly use a for loop. What if you don't know the end of the sequence? A while loop. That's it. Always believe on two conditions, whether if it is present or not present. In the same way, if you know the end of a sequence, because basically for loop is useful to iterate over the elements of a sequence, because where it means that we can use a for loop to execute a group of statements repeatedly, but depending only on the number of elements in the sequence, right? So just remember that point. And the syntax of for loop looks like this, where you need not worry about for loop in other programming languages, because we have the same thing in C programming language also, but here it is different, where you need not worry about that part. Here it is simple, where you take up a loop controlling variable. That means this specific variable controls each and every element in the sequence. For variable in sequence, and you can have n number of statements. Need not worry. Let's directly go to the practical part. So just I am continuing in the same Python file, where I just keep the above parts as comments, because now we are entering into repetition control instructions, which is other type of control statements. So I just wanted to note some important points here, where you can refer it later, because repetition control instructions are also termed as loops. You see the word repetition. What do you mean by repetition? You are trying to repeat it, because with the help of this we will be having so many use cases. Because in the real use cases, in building web applications or making some API calls, we have so many things with it. So when we go for repetition control instructions, we generally term them as loops. Loop, whatever you take, that gets repeated, right? So in the same way, we are having mainly two, for and while. We also have else suit, but I'll be discussing it later. I don't want your brain to be bothered about those things right now. So we'll be first discussing about for and while, and we also have some other kind of statements or specifically keywords, where how do you control these loops, where you try to break and continue, pass, assert, exceptions. We have all of them. First, let's try to understand the usage of for loop, because basically for loop is basically useful to iterate over the elements of a sequence. Always remember, for loop is, if you are having a specific sequence, that can be a string or list or dictionary, you can use for loop to just iterate each and every value. It is useful to iterate over the elements. What do you mean by iterate? You just need to go one by one. You just try to check each and every element. I'll take a very simple example and I'll make you understand. You need not worry about it. So for loop is useful to iterate over the elements of a sequence. Because you already know the length of the sequence, right? If your sequence is defined, how do you find out the length of it? You already have the built-in function called as len, right? Yes. So it is useful to iterate over the elements of a sequence. That means you use for loop to execute a group of statements repeatedly. Simple. So the syntax looks like this. I give the syntax as, just keep a note of it. you use the keyword called as for, and the variable you take, that variable is the loop controlling variable. You take up I or anything, because in the C programming also you write if you make a comparison and you just increment it. But in Python you need not do it. You just write a loop controlling variable. In that, in is your membership operator. Yes, that's what I told you. Those operators and data types and these conditions are not basics in Python. With those you can do so many things. So you need not worry about any other things. Always just make sure that you can learn Python in your own flexible way. If you are good at loops and conditions, you can build a function. And if you are able to create your own functions according to problem statement, you are damn good at becoming a Python pro programmer. Okay, so just always believe in that words and work hard accordingly. Along with hard work, be smart in thinking logic. Okay, it comes only with practice. We cannot expect on the day one of taking the course you do the thing. No, you just make sure that with the consistent practice, make your brain tuned in a logical way, it will be easier. So for your loop controlling variable in the sequence, and there you go. Anyways, I'm writing in comments, so you don't have indentation happening here. You can give n number of statements. That statements can be anything. So it's up to user interest. Okay. So this is how, this is the syntax of your for loop. Now let's take a simple program. Let's take a simple string or whatever it is, or even a list. What happens if I create a list with some values 1, 2, 5, and I write my name and I just give up some numbers. Okay, let me give a float also, then you will be happy, right? We have given all types. Now how do you execute? How do you take each and every value? How do you fetch each and every value from a list? Yes, that is indexing. So with the help of indexing, what do? You access each and every value, or even if you go for specific index a of 0, print a of 2. What is a of 2? A of 0 is 1, a of 1 is 2, a of 2 is 5. So obviously when you save and execute it, you get the value 5 in the result. Yes, that is a simple way why we are discussing this, because from this part only you will understand the necessity of control instructions, which is repetition control instructions. Because now if I give print a of 1 is to 4, that means we are going for slicing, because this is basically, we have already seen about this as indexing, and now this is we are going for slicing, because I wanted to relate the same thing with the for loop. So when I give a of 1 is to 4, starting with a of 1, what is a of 1? 2. 1, 2, 3. So you get 2, 5 saket, because you don't include the fourth index, right? That is 4 minus 1. So you get 2, 5 saket in the output. You see, in the list format, because you are accessing the values from the list. But my use case is, how can I take individual values from that list? That means you are trying to unpack the values from that list. That's where you just try to understand, or you just create a loop. That is a loop where you write for anything. The loop variable can be anything. For I in A, because your sequence is A, keep colon at the end and just press enter. Automatically 4 spaces indentation happens here. You need not worry. Then you need to print. What you need to print? Not A. You should print I. There you go. You see a difference in the result. What happened over there? You can easily understand each and every value from the list has been unpacked as a single value. See, 1, 2, 5, saket 2.6. You can clearly see it, because you gave for I in A, print of I, right? And if you want to see the result in a single line itself, because you have already understood about the different ways of print format, right? Now you can use them. You can give end is equal to space. Now you see, let me just make this as comment. You just save it and execute it. You find a difference. You see, this is your each and every value unpacked from a list. It's not a list again here, because that is where you find the difference using end and without using end. And what happens if you give end is equal to new line? You can play with them. You need not worry that I should tell every time. You can just go ahead. You see everything in new line, and you just make it as /t, that is tab space, and go for it. you get tab space, because you are just unpacking each and every value from a sequence, right? You are reading that. So this is how you can take any sequence, right? So then, even if your list is consisting of only strings, right? Suppose if I am giving my name and some the place, I just gave these two things, right? Now I wanted to get both of them in caps. You can do it, because if you try to do like this, print of b dot, what are the methods possible over a list? You have append, extend, you have only them, right? You don't have the cases of converting that thing to uppercase and lowercase. But when you try to take each and every value from a list, right, you are just trying to unpack them. So let me try to show it for you. Now if I keep all of them in multi-line comments for a easy understanding, now what I do? For I in B, that means now we are referring to each and every element. So first I is Saket and next it is going to take as Vijayawada. Then obviously what happens? Now you can make sure you give print of I dot, because now you are referring to a string. In string what do you have? You can take in the format of uppercase and lowercase. You can see suggestion coming up over there. I dot upper. So obviously you see the result now. You can take Saket and Vijayawada in uppercase. See how does we are relating our concepts which we have discussed in the beginning. In the beginning I told you, right, those functions are very simple over there, but how do you use them in a problem statement is your point. So always relate that thing, then only it will be easier for us. Now even if you come out of this and give print of I again, you see the difference over here. Execute it. You see, you are getting only Vijayawada. Why? Because if you are referring for I in B, this is first case and this is second case. So when you come out of the loop, you are treating the last element in the sequence. So this is the simple another example. Okay. Now what I will do is, we will try to take a simple list and we will try to find the sum of elements in a list. Right? How do you find out sum of elements? You add each and every number, right? Now I'll try to make use of my for loop. You can take one program in any other way. So it's up to user interest. You need not worry that you should go in this way only. It's fine. Because now once you finish up the loops and the statements, I'll try to introduce you how to take multiple input from a user, where you need not worry of only taking int of input of, if you have 10 inputs, you need not write 10 statements. You can use this for loop concept with another concept called as list comprehension, where you try to use it. Okay. Now what I'll do is, let's try to create a simple list where I take all integers, right? If I'm trying to find out sum, it should be simple, right? So what is the sum of values? 23 plus 6, 29, 29 plus 4, 33, 38, 39, right? 10, 16 plus 23, 39 is your result. You should get the result as 39 at the end. That is our problem statement. Okay. Yes, we can do it. You need not worry. How do we do that? It's simple. Because first you wanted to see the result, take up a variable to store that result. So I'll take a variable, because everything is important. What we have learned from the beginning, we'll take up each and every concept. So we'll take up a variable to store the sum. So that can be any variable. I'll take up my d. D is equal to 0, because I cannot give any number, right? If I give d equal to 1, your sum, original sum changes, right? The same way you do mathematically, I'll do the same way in a program part here. So here d is equal to 0, that is we are storing the sum in this. Now what is the next step? You have taken a variable and you have taken a list and directly write a for loop. You need not worry. But I'll write a comment here so that it will be easier for you. You start iterating over the sequence. You don't know what is a sequence. The sequence can be a set or a list or tuple. But for dictionary, it is a bit different because you are having pairs, right? Yes. Now you take for I or j, anything. For I in your sequence A. You are not printing now. You are not adding here. You are adding each and every value. So what do? You cannot directly take up anything related to I, but take up your variable. What is your variable? D, right? You just give D is equal to, just increment with each and every value. That's it. Because D is 0 now. If I take what is first value of I, 1. So 0 plus 1, D will be 1. And you just print D. That's it. You need not do anything. Now, let me show you what would be the result. You just save and execute it. You see, 1, 5, 10, 16, 39. You are getting 5 results because your sequence is having 5 elements. So 5 times loop is being executing. Because for the first case, you see, let me just keep side by side so that you will understand. Because that is the way you should execute yourself, and you should start understanding the difference between the loops and your program. How do you write? So for the first case, what is our result? Our result is basically we are trying to repeat our loop, right? So first case, the D value is 0 plus 1, D value is 1, you got 1. And the next case, the next element is 4, right? So D is equal to, what is D value? 1. What is I value? 4. So 1 plus 4, D is 5. Then 10, then 16. 16 plus 23, 39. There you go. You got your result. If you don't want to see each and every repetition, just come out of the loop. That's it. You can just print off D here. Instead, make this as comment, and you can make any wide print statements here, any print format. You can give the sum is percentile D. You can take percentile of D. That's it. You can go any way. So save and execute. You get directly the final result. 39. The sum is 39. So depending on use case, you can go anyway. Even if you keep this print, it's fine. So for your understanding, go in a very easy approach. You see, for each and every repetition, you get the result. How many number of print you are having, that many times you get the result. So this is how you have taken a sequence. You are trying to find out each and every values from that. Each and every value sum. This is how you generally use for loop. Okay, we have taken a string example. We have taken strings inside a list and a list. Now, how can I apply the same concept to a dictionary? Because I'll try to create a dictionary with my details. My name is Saket and my age is 27. Okay. Now, what if I wanted to fetch the details individually? Because in a for loop, when you use for loop, what happens? Let me just go directly. I write for I in A. Directly you print I. You need not go for any other approach. You see the difference. When you print I, what happens? You are getting only name and age, because you are getting only keys. Because the difference of using dictionaries and other types is you generally get the result. 1, 4, 5, 6. Name and age are only keys. You are fetching the keys. What if you wanted to get individual pairs or complete values? There you go, where you cannot take I dot values, I dot items, because you have in dictionary. Because in dictionary, what do you have? To get the keys, you have A dot, because it's a dictionary, right? You get keys, you have values. See, when you go for keys, you get its keys, right? Because we have all discussed about it. In the same way, if you want to fetch the values from it, just give, instead of A here, just pass A dot values. That's it. You get your desired result. What you got? You got Saket and 27 from it. So in this way, you are easily to fetch. If you want entire pair, what you can do? Instead of values, just replace items. When you replace items, what happens over there? When you go for items, you get each pair as a tuple inside a list. So if we wanted to fetch items, we need to use dot items, because when we use items, what happens? When you execute it, you get individual pairs as a tuple inside a list. So if you wanted to get only keys, what you can give? Dot keys. So this is how you use a for loop for any sequence. So just practice on that. It will be easy to understand.